to make sure we have enough time with our breakout groups. So with all of that being said, I will introduce our first two speakers who are talking about the Peripheral Manuscripts project. Sarah Noonan is assistant professor at St. Mary's College in Notre Dame, Indiana, where she specializes in medieval English literature and manuscript studies. Her research has appeared in the journals New Medieval Literatures, Viator, and the Journal of the Early Book Society, among others. She has held research fellowships through the Folger Shakespeare Library, the Beinecke Library, the Huntington Library in coordination with Lincoln College, Oxford, and the American Philosophical Society. She is currently a co-PI on the Peripheral Manuscripts project. When complete, this CLEAR-funded project will host high-quality digital images and item-level metadata for over 70 codices and over 400 medieval manuscript fragments found in the collections of 22 Midwestern institutions. And speaking along with Sarah is Liz Hebbard. She is the assistant professor of French and Francophone studies and the founding co-director of the Book Lab at Indiana University. She is a specialist of medieval manuscripts in Latin and French, and of medieval music and literature in French and Occitan. She is currently writing a book on the manuscript tradition of troubadour lyrics. Her research focuses on questions of authorship, gender, material culture, and medievalism. Within manuscript studies, she is particularly interested in binding fragments, non-invasive imaging technologies, and the establishment and development of North American manuscript collections. And you are welcome to live tweet this presentation. And I am posting all the information needed for you to do that now. And with that, I will hand the screen over to Liz and Sarah. Welcome.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for the invitation to talk about our project. Our project got started this past summer fully. We received notification of our award late last fall, and we officially launched our work on June 1st, though it has been a bit upended by some of the coronavirus restrictions, which we'll think about in a minute. And let me just go ahead and start this presentation. So we wanted to provide you, Liz and I wanted to provide you with an overview of what the scope of our project is, what our eventual goals will be, and to think through why we felt this was an important project to begin and to launch in the first place. So this is a 3-year project, the Peripheral Manuscripts project, funded by a grant from CLEAR, and we have 22 partner institutions in the Midwest. This project began when I started my the origin, the kernel of this project began when I first started working at St. Mary's College, and I realized that we had manuscripts in our special collections library, which they were not kind of in the census, the Ricci census, they were kind of undiscoverable. The librarians themselves didn't even really know that they had them. When I did my job interview here, they were like, oh, there's nothing here that will interest you. And so when I started working with the collection and kind of realized that we had 3 medieval codices and over 10 fragments, but even a few more additional things as well that I've since kind of been sorting through. I started to wonder, like, how many other institutions had manuscript material that had not yet been cataloged and described and made discoverable, work which, of course, Lisa Fagan Davis has been kind of thinking about for decades. But kind of that's kind of the origin of this project. So there's 4 PIs on the project. There's myself. Liz is the main PI. I'm a co-PI, and Ian Cornelius at Loyola University Chicago is a co-PI, and Michelle Damau at IU Bloomington kind of is also kind of working with us. So between the 4 of us and our 22 partner institutions, We have identified at least 78 codices and 406 manuscript fragments for digitization through this grant. We had some meetings, a round of virtual partner meetings over the summer where more material kind of has been kind of uncovered since the writing of the grant. And so as of today, we're up to 79 codices, 526 fragments, 59 separate documents, 1 scroll, and 3 binding fragments that might potentially be included in the project. So the project focuses on small collections that haven't been economically feasible for institutions to digitize on their own. Speaking of my experience at St. Mary's, they don't have the staffing or the equipment or the just capacity in order to digitize and describe their manuscript material. There's nobody on staff, right, for example, that knows how to do this. And so we're working with a lot of institutions which are in similar situations where they might have a desire for their materials to be used, but there's economic realities on the ground, staffing realities on the ground, which make it virtually impossible for them to make this material more accessible to the broader community. Because we intend and hope for this project to be sustainable and to kind of interface with other projects as deeply as possible, we're hoping that we intend for project metadata and images to be aggregated with existing collections, right, as fully as possible. Thus, some of our interest in kind of working with the digital scriptorium and thinking about kind of where this project might be 10, 20 years down the road, in the hopes that we can arrive at a more comprehensive understanding of North American manuscript holdings, right, the circulation of material within North America over the past few centuries. Just as a brief overview of kind of what we're doing in this project, because we are having so many partner institutions kind of involved in this project, we needed to have, for the sake of quality control and consistency, in general, a centralized location where the digitization is going to be taking place. It's going to be taking place at IU Bloomington. But what we wanted to do as PIs is we wanted to have a site visit at each of our partner institutions so we could evaluate their materials for inclusion within the project. We're primarily focusing on pre-1600 manuscript material written in Latinate, kind of Roman scripts, because of the expertise of our project team. Material will be transported to IU for digitization and then returned after that fact. And so, and then we will be kind of providing all of our partners with archival grade digitized copies of the material and the metadata that we produced during the project, in addition to displaying it kind of in an open access formula via IU's library system. I'm going to turn it over to Liz, who's going to walk you through the next few slides.
Thanks, Sarah. And thanks, DS team, for inviting us to talk today. This slide just represents our original. I was getting some feedback. This slide represents our original plan for digitization for the entirety of the grant. Of course, we may need to extend the original 3-year plan, and CLIR is extremely understanding of that and has been extremely flexible in working with all of their grant projects. But our original plan was to conduct all of the site visits at first, as Sarah mentioned, to assess the appropriateness of material to include in the project, but also critically to assess the condition of items, both to ensure safe transport and to identify any obstacles that ink bleed or flaking paint might present in the photography and scanning process. And then we had this very neatly organized plan to put partners in groups of 4 or 5 and bring them in what we were calling regional meetings to Indiana to see our digitization lab, to meet with the team, and even to transport the materials themselves. Because of the current situation, both of those plans are now up in the air, and we're sort of ad hoc conducting site visits while we can, where we can do so safely. And then our plan for the regional meetings may also entirely disappear, at least at the beginning of the project. We're going to try to use a courier service to transport some materials for our partners who aren't able to transport them themselves, or we're offering that, that choice. And essentially, you know, because one of our main goals in this project is to build community among collections in the Midwest, we're really loath to let go of this idea of regional meetings, but for the moment, it doesn't seem possible to be reevaluated. Sarah, can you? Oh, thank you. So this was a beautiful map that Michelle put together just to sort of visualize where the collections are that we're working with. And these are the regional meeting groups that we had originally had identified. And Bloomington is the red star sort of in the center bottom. So you can see that we're actually, one of the funniest conversations we had at the beginning of this project was defining what is the Midwest and what is the sort of geographical constraint that we're dealing with. But in the end, we felt, 22 partners who were really responsive with us at the beginning and excited about the project. That was plenty to deal with in this first group. And then our hope is to continue this work, continue building community in Midwestern holding collections and getting to know their collections. Could you go to the next slide, Sarah? Thank you. So one of the main things I wanted to just talk briefly about, and I'm happy to answer more detailed questions if we have time or via email, was our metadata and descriptive goals. So here I want to thank, I know I saw her Monday and I think she's here today, but Dot Porter has been an incredible supporter of this project and providing us with materials that Bibliophily used. So thank you, Dot, and thank you, Bibliophily. We really didn't want to reinvent the wheel. There's been so much great work done in thinking about the organization of manuscript metadata. So we have taken that and adapted it slightly because of the large number of manuscript fragments that we're dealing with among our materials. We've made some adjustments to the categories of specifically page level description, including things like line height and writing space dimensions. But mainly we've taken our descriptive categories from Bibliophily. So as you see in front of you on this slide, these are our goals for the categories we want to fill out for each item that we describe. We are using and leaving behind documentation about our descriptive methods and controlled language. So sort of passing on the knowledge that we build through this project on a public facing GitHub page. And then in terms of what our description is actually going to look like when it's posted with our images, I can't describe the system because when we applied for the grant, we had a one digital collection interface in place at IU, and that is being developed to provide more flexibility and even more viewing options. So we're very excited to see what that is going to look like, but we have in place something called Pages Online, which you can see now at IU, but we can't quite yet share an example of what our description and image layout is going to look like in the end. Our goal is to, or let's say our practice is to store our descriptions in spreadsheets and then map from the spreadsheets both to our system at IU and back to partners. So partners will have access to all of our raw materials, the original image, the raw images and descriptions. But from the spreadsheets that we put together, we'll be able to derive the format of metadata that each partner institution needs for their systems. I won't go into the technical details there, but I'll just say, although IU, as part of the grant, has proposed to host all of the project materials for an initial period, our goal is to be able to provide everything that we've done back to partner institutions in a way that they can integrate it with their own systems. So we're hoping that every partner will have a way to integrate the complete data for their items by the end of the project term, or at least by the end of the initial hosting period of the data at IU. We are not currently using TEI to encapsulate our metadata, but that's something that we're still tossing around because the TEI header may eventually accommodate it all. And there, I would refer you to Michelle Dalmau, who's extremely active in the text encoding initiative. And then I think the final thing, I want to save a little bit of time for this. So again, I'm happy to answer any questions about our description process and our metadata, But we put together some slides here at the end of some sample images of items that we're dealing with. As manuscript people, we all like to see these objects. So Sarah, I don't know if you want to talk through some of these, or maybe we could just briefly list them and scroll through some of the images, and you can see some of the exciting objects we're going to get to see.
Yeah, so we were really excited to see our partner share images of this book of hours with us. It's such a weird little manuscript that we loved it so much. We made it the image for our project. It was like that sample image that we wanted to advertise our project with, a book of hours use of Rome. So we're looking forward to seeing what else St. Meinrad has in their collections. I think they'll have some pretty good and exciting stuff. I had a couple pictures here. Well, one from St. Mary's. We have a manuscript dated to about 1200 of Buchard of Worm's Decretum, the miscellany that has part of the Decretum within it. We also have an example of a gospel lectionary from De Kalb that will be included. We have a really nice manuscript dated from 1299. It's not like necessarily like visually nice. It doesn't have a bunch of illumination, but it has one of the earliest witnesses of Thomas Aquinas's Enthean essay. It's been dated to 1299 by a wonderful colophon at the end of that text. And we also have, as an example, we have a book of hours at St. Mary's College also. It's a 15th century book of hours, use of Amiens, so produced in France, with some nice inscriptions in the back describing the history of the family that once owned it.
And here, I don't know if I have time to talk through the rest of them, but I just want to point out for the lily fragments, there are a few representative images here. Could you go forward one more, Sarah? Thank you. So a number of the items at the lily are under-described, and a lot of them come from bindings. So that's particularly exciting to me. And the lily is doing a sort of parallel project with us and has committed to digitizing 150 items from the collection, in addition to the, so not including the 50 that have already been shared with Digital Scriptorium. So I'm hoping this project will also create more discoverability about the enormous number of really exciting manuscripts here at IU that aren't discoverable right now on the Lily's website. So here's another really fun wrapper in our collection. And then the last thing I want to say, because I think we're running up against our time limit, is I thanked Dot, but I also want to thank some of our other huge supporters that are here right now, including our friends at the Newberry Library and Lisa Fagan-Davis, who've been incredibly supportive of this project. And I've also seen a few of our partners here in the meeting. So hello and thank you. And thank you all for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you both so much. It's a really exciting project. And I know DS is looking forward to working with you as we're both developing our separate projects. Are there any questions for Liz and Sarah? I don't see any in the chat right now, but feel free to raise your hand and we can talk face to face. Deborah asked if they could repeat where the images are posted online.
The images will be hosted at IU Bloomington. They'll be IIIF compatible. They're currently using a system called Pages Online, which is what we promised that we would be using to host those images in our grant proposal. However, they are reworking Pages Online into a more advanced platform, and I'm not certain if it's going to maintain that name moving forward. Do you know, Liz?
No, the name is going to change, and I think they're still settling on it. If you'd like to, Pages Online is our digital collections interface, so I'm posting a link to that in the chat. There are different kinds of collections there. It's not just rare materials, but we don't know at the moment what it's gonna look like when it's revamped. That's rolling out in the next 18 months.
Thanks. All right, if there are no other questions, we can move on to, oh, Kibblechim made it just in time. You mentioned lack of expertise in smaller institutions. How many people will be working on cataloging the manuscripts?
Liz, feel free to jump in here too. There's three main, myself and Liz and Ian Cornelius at Loyola University Chicago are going to be doing the bulk of the metadata creation for these items, but we are very much hoping to establish good working, we're trying to establish good working relationships with all of our partners. We are inviting them to help us with the production of metadata up into a point, right? And so we're hoping that there's shared expertise kind of going both ways as we are working with them.
Great, thanks. So we will move on. Thanks, Sarah and Liz. And if you think of other questions you'd like to ask about peripheral manuscripts, please use the Google group and I'm sure they will check that. So next up is Kelly Tuttle. Kelly is the cataloger for the Manuscripts of the Muslim World, a multi-repository digitization and cataloging project. Before that, she was an assistant professor of Arabic. Lately, she's been turning again to teaching, working with Schoenberg Institute of Manuscript colleagues at the University of Pennsylvania to create learning modules about manuscripts for people to explore during their pandemic downtime. Kelly, the screen is yours. Welcome.
Thanks, Emma. I'm just putting in the chat a link to the Manuscripts of the Muslim World open page. So if you want to go and look at that while I'm talking, that's fine. I think you should familiarize yourself with it a bit. I'm also going to share a little presentation. Oops, I'm not. Here it is. Okay. So as Emma said, I'm the cataloger for the Manuscripts of the Muslim World project. I'm just going to give a bit of an overview of the project. And then I wanted to think about some of the questions or problems that I've had working with this project and think about how, if they were much larger scale as they would be for a union catalog, the kinds of things that we would have to think about making a union catalog. So the Manuscripts of the Muslim World project is also a CLIR-funded 3-year project for digitization and cataloging of Islamic manuscripts at several different repositories. And it's just finishing up now. We're in the last 5 months. And of course, the pandemic threw a bit of a wrench into it. So there might be an extension of the grant to finish out some of the things that had been planned. The 3 main repositories that are participating are Columbia University, the Free Library of Philadelphia, and the Penn Libraries, which includes the Katz Center and the Penn Museum. And altogether, there are over 600 items that are sort of ready to go now. They're not quite all up on open yet. In addition to those 3 main repositories, there are 2 smaller ones that each have about 30 items, and then there are 4 contributors who each have 4 items or fewer. So it is sort of Philadelphia centered, but Columbia is also a big participant in the project. There are also 8 languages represented, and there's 1 cataloger. So there are 3 project PIs, but there's 1 cataloger who's working with all of the items. And all of the digital surrogates are located on OPEN at that project page that I just put in the chat. So something that I had been thinking about since the project started, and I still think about it now, is this project really supposed to be an entity like bibliophily, where everything is sort of gathered together and it has a group identity? Or is it just because of grant requirements, several repositories that have all cataloged their material at the same time by the same person, but it shouldn't really be thought of as a group project? Because the collections at Columbia and the Free Library and Penn are all very different, and they each have kind of obvious strengths that don't overlap. So on the one hand, that makes the project very good because we don't have a lot of overlapping material. Everyone contributes something new and valuable. But on the other hand, it seems sort of odd to think of it as a group project when there will be no public-facing portal for it, except for the open page. So I want to think through the open presentation of the manuscripts, and then also a couple of other questions that come from that. So open is the digital repository for manuscript materials and some archival materials at Penn. It also hosts other repositories. So if you go to the open website and you look at the list of repositories, you'll be able to see everywhere that open hosts materials from. And all of the data is open access, which means that images in TIFF form or in JPEG form and all of the TEI can be gathered by anyone who knows how to do it or who can follow instructions, and then they can take it and do whatever they want with it. There are very few restrictions, which is fantastic. And so in terms of access, the project is just great for access. But access and discoverability in this particular project, I feel like are kind of divided in a way that's not super helpful. Also, only the digitized works are on OPEN, of course, because it's a digital repository. So works that are cataloged as part of the project but aren't digitized are not going to be on the open website. They'll just be cataloged in OCLC WorldCat. And for those of you who regularly use OCLC, I don't find it super nice for looking up manuscripts. So I'm afraid that some things are sort of still falling through the cracks in terms of discoverability just because they aren't part of the open project and they aren't very findable on OCLC. In addition, each repository has its own standards. They're all using MARC, but within MARC, there's enough wiggle room to make it so that data ends up in different places. So for Columbia, when I'm cataloging for Columbia, I follow their cataloging preferences, same thing for Free Library, and same thing for Penn. So that means that if you were to go to OCLC and sort of gather all of the data for this project, if you could find it all, you would end up with the data in different MARC fields, kind of formatted differently, and then your data would be a bit messy and you would have to go through and clean it up, which is fine, but it makes gathering the data for this project a little more difficult. Another problem of having data in different locations is I put difficult, but it's not actually difficult. It's just sort of tedious to update records. And that's just because you have to start with updating the OCLC record, which I can do. But then I have to tell the PI at the participating repository, oh, I made a change to your record. Can you please re-import it into your OPAC? And then I have to get the MARC XML from OCLC and give it to the OPEN people so that they can update the OPEN record. And then if you just think of that process made bigger, so if it were to go onto Internet Archive, let's say, or HathiTrust or something like this, then there would be that many more places where the records are that would need to be updated every time something changes. And it's just, it makes you sort of go, do I need to fix this typo? Or can I just let it go? And then a sort of subsequent problem is that it's hard for patrons to find some of these works. I already mentioned the OCLC problem, but for example, if they're thinking of the project, as the Manuscripts of the Muslim World project, then they aren't really going to be able to find anything unless they go to the open page. Columbia has a collection name for everything that's in the project for them, but it's manuscripts. It's not Manuscripts in the Muslim World. It's Muslim World Manuscripts. It's slightly different. And then also Free Library has its own collection name, which is based on their call numbers or shelf marks. So that's great. I mean, if you know either one of those collection names, you can find the collection at Columbia, you can find it at Free Library, but there's nowhere that sort of gathers the whole thing together. And then the last area of OPEN that I just wanted to look at is that users are sort of, at least this has been my experience, and I've gotten several emails asking, how do you use OPEN? But they're sort of intimidated by the way that it looks, and if they don't understand how it's organized, and it's very organized. It's not that hard to understand how it's organized. It's just not what people are used to looking at. And so people can be intimidated by it, and then they just email me and say, I can't find what I want. Can you just send me this image? And then the search is also not robust. And it can be frustrating if you're trying to use the search box to find things within the project. You just get returned you get returns that are not exactly what you're looking for most of the time. So in my experience, when working with the project contents on Open, the easiest thing to do is actually just look through the contents page on the screen. And so here, if I'm looking for sharh, for example, which is a commentary, I can see that there are 46 occurrences of sharh, which means that there are 46 times when sharh probably occurs in the title, because the title is one of the things that shows up on this main contents page. The other thing that shows up is the date, and then interestingly, the scribe, so not the author. So if you wanted to find an author, if you were like, how many copies of Tilimsani do we have in this collection, you can't put that in and find it on this page. You would have to sort of either do a search that can be kind of frustrating using the search box, or you would have to go through and just look at everything and open it and see, is this what I want? So this is what I mean by the difference between Access and Discovery, because I feel like Access is very good now. You can download the whole shebang if you want to, and then run all kinds of inquiries on it. But if you're just trying to discover what we have, it's not a great discovery platform. If we think of the project as a project, as a whole, as a project, if we think of it as each separate repository has cataloged their materials now, and you go to their OPAC, fine, that works really well. So it's just I feel like the project is a little bit unsure of where its focus is supposed to be. At least that's how it appears to me. All right, another area that I think DS is really gonna have to think about is the languages question. So for this project, which is small, this is a small scale project, there's one cataloger, but there are 8 languages, and I can only deal with 4 of those if on a good day, okay? And one of them is only if there's enough Arabic to help me. So that means relying on the goodwill of volunteers for languages I can't read, because the grant didn't write into the request funds for subcontracting other people to catalog languages that I can't read. And so this, kind of goes in 2 ways. One way, you get a volunteer who is super helpful, and that happened for Syriac for this project. Joshua Mugler at Himmel was really helpful for Syriac. On the other hand, it can go the way of Turkish for this project, where I can deal with a lot of it, but some of it is fragmentary, or I'm just having trouble with it, and I've sent it out to many people, but it's volunteer, they all have lives, they're all busy, and I just don't hear back. So for DS, I would think something that needs to happen is, in addition to full-time staff members, it would be nice if there was some kind of mini grant scheme so that you could have somebody who could be trained to work with manuscripts to come and look at the manuscripts that you need help with because of language, let's say, and they give you information in exchange for being paid to come out and look and be trained in how to work with manuscripts. It would also be a way to help collections or help repositories that either don't have the staff to work with manuscripts or don't have the knowledge to catalog what they do have. So, and I'm just going to end. I think there will be plenty of time for questions if you have them. So these are 5 necessities for Islamic manuscripts that I think need to be there in DS. One is that there should be no cutoff date, because manuscript cultures existed up to the 20th century, and there's really no reason to have an end date before that. There needs to be script searchability for the title and author of any text. And by script searchability, I mean that somebody should be able to come in and type in Arabic what they want, and it would bring up the author. And this is just a side effect of having different romanization schemes. So if you don't happen to romanize something exactly right, then you just can't find what you're looking for. And often it's easier just to put it in Arabic and bring up everything that way. There should be facet searchability to easily weed out unwanted materials. So for this, I was thinking more like what the Schoenberg database uses. So all of those kinds of facets, language, but then all of the genres, which we're using a lot of the genre terms in the cataloging for the project, like commentary, poetry, these kinds of things. But it would be really nice if those were there so that they could be faceted that way. And then finally, and most importantly, there needs to be a name authority file that is including a lot of the Islamic manuscript names. So that's a ton of scribes, a ton of authors, many of whom do not exist in VIAF or LC or anywhere really. Well, I know where they exist, but it needs to be somewhere public that could be added to without a huge amount of hassle, but at the same time would be overseen so that you're making sure that you're not inputting the same person 5 different ways and having it seem like it's 5 different people when it's actually one person. So I brought an example just to show you, for those of you who are not familiar with Islamic manuscript names. This is Rumi, who I'm sure you've all heard of, but this is an excessive example, of course, but this is the way that LC has it romanized. But then you could romanize it any of these other ways. And so really you should be able to put in any one of these versions and come back to the right Rumi. So that's what an authority file would be like, and it would be wonderful if we had one that was for Islamic, that included more Islamic names. And then 5th, it would be nice if there were linked data for names, places, and works at the minimum. So that we could make more connections, because right now I feel like Islamic manuscript studies, it's coming along, there's been huge strides, but there could be so much more done with it in terms of making connections among the different writers and works and everything. And so if we had all of this data available and linked, that would be wonderful. That's all I wanted to say. So if there are any questions, I can take them, or we can just move on.
Thank you so much, Kelly. You provided so much good advice for DS as far as what we need to think about to incorporate Islamic manuscripts. I really appreciate that. Are there any questions? I know we have 2 comments from Lisa. The first one was that standardization of manuscript records in MARC is a huge problem still. Let's figure that one out as a community, because that would be super helpful if there was one standard for MARC. And Lisa also commented that another possibility is to offer small honoraria to scholars who provide cataloging metadata remotely. Yeah, that's a good idea too. Yeah, I think there's a lot of routes we could do to help supply catalogers to institutions that need it. Daniel says Kelly's 5 points are super important for Arabic names. Yeah, I'm gonna save your presentation forever, Kelly. Any questions? I don't see any hand raises yet. All right, well, again, if you think of any later on, please post them in the Google group and we can take a look at them. Thanks again, Kelly, for a great presentation. I am going to stop recording now.